racial trauma. Thank you. Well, welcome back to our show, In Our Own Defense podcast. We have Dr. Tarver. Today we have Dr. Jernigan Noesi, and she's here helping us figure out racial trauma. She's informing us in various levels. We've gone over the racial dimensions, racism as their dimensions. We've gone over these different terminologies and how we articulate the types of racial trauma. And we're going to continue our conversation and dialogue with Dr. Noesi. Dr. Tarver?
So, of course, as we know, one of the major debates that's going on right now is how people should be expressing how they feel about the injustices they are seeing. So we've been talking about trauma and the effects that trauma can have on people in the debates. And this is spanned across social media, across TV. We have seen people screenshot images and put people's contact information on there when they made responses such as all lives matter, you all don't need to be rioting, you don't need to be burning things down. This is how you should be handling this. Your behavior is now negating all the work that you were trying to do with regard to justice and equality. You've erased that. You don't need to be burning things down. You need to be protesting. But then there's that other argument. Okay, so when we protested, you didn't like the way we protested. So then there were complaints about that. So can you talk to us about the different ways that we may be experiencing trauma, the different ways it may show up and how our reactions look in terms of some of what is happening that we're seeing in various cities that have had some, what I call revolutions. I wouldn't call them rioting per se. But can you just talk to us about how people are responding, and for people that want to talk to their children as a follow-up and families about how can we participate, how can we become active? What are some recommendations you may have for families to talk to their kids about being advocates for making some changes?
Sure. I mean, I think, as you noted, there are a variety of reactions, and I am of the mindset that there's no one way necessarily that one should react. And I think one of my personal stance as well as my professional stances, as opposed to operating from a place of judgment, necessarily, right? I see it as my job. I challenge when I'm teaching my students, if I don't understand something about what someone else is doing, I have to pause and ask myself what it is about their experience or perspective, right? That would inform or allow me to better understand. That's where I try to come from. And I am also of the mindset that with regard to thinking about protesting and rioting, language is first of all powerful. But I do think that it speaks to just another level of hurt, another level of injustice, another level of folks who have been unheard for years. I also think that we are grossly negligent with regard to understanding and remembering history in terms of progress. And any movement that to me has been progressive, any social movement, is not due to folks who just kind of sat idly by and waited for someone, but through some form of protest, is the idea. So I think I am warmed. I think on certain days, sort of see that there's movement, and to see, folks who are out of all age groups. I'm hearing, I had friends text messaging me today saying that their teenage, children want to go out and want to protest amidst the, and they're trying to, sort of understand that. Historically, we know that even if we go back to the civil rights movement, right, that was the college kind of age generation that moved forward. So again, I think history is important there, but I'd encourage us all just to not judge and to understand that we all have strengths with regard to what we may bring to the table. And so for some folks, they're going to be our protesters. For some folks, they're going to be, our advocates with regard to, using and leveraging maybe their relative positions of power with regard to, policy. We need all of those things. So as opposed to, telling someone what they should or should not be doing, let's look collectively at what needs to be done, because no one way, I think, is going to kind of move the needle with regard to, looking at, racial equity necessarily. I will say that folks are reacting, after being inundated, really for the last couple of weeks in this, kind of, again, latest wave They're reacting, based on seeing the video of George Floyd in particular repeatedly shown without any kind of trigger warning, right? So flooded. I'm hearing parents also talk about their younger children, 8, 9, stumble across the video, even though they've tried to protect them, from that imagery. And so they're forced into now conversations that they may have started but weren't quite prepared in this regard. So that inundation, whether it's social media, general media, conversations, with lots of folks is just overwhelming. And in addition to that, what happens, especially when we think about, yet another experience of explicit, racism and George Floyd in particular, again, we go back to Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, right? So we've had months of news stories leading up to this culmination. That is it, the cumulative effect, I think, ultimately for folks of hearing the stories amidst the pandemic that has really led to this kind of peak and uprising where it's exhausting, it is overwhelming. But that, from a trauma-informed perspective, right, when we feel that there is a threat in our bodies, or when our body senses that there may be a threat, and racism is one of those situations where, particularly for folks of color, there's constantly a heightened sense of awareness. Our bodies don't have the opportunity to relax and go back to what I call, the place of homeostasis, where literally our organs relax and can be in a sense of calm. So incident after incident, you have to recognize that part of that fatigue is about the information, but it's literally about your body being in a constant state of hypervigilance, literally. And it is exhausting. And so I am hearing this week from a lot of folks as a clinician and otherwise, that they're not just tired, that they're exhausted, that they're bone tired, that it's hard to get out of bed, which are some of the, what we know to be the symptoms and consequences that as clinicians, we look for folks. Other folks are triggered, right? So I've heard folks also begin to recount their experiences with the police or to recount stories that they've heard. So it also brings up historical or past experiences that you personally, or even those that you've heard in your family, right, that were racially traumatic. And you got this cumulative effect. It's not just this incident. For some, it may be, but for other folks, again, it really kind of brings up the idea of, what are my personal experiences? What have I seen? Again, for me, this the psychological experience as a clinician in terms of what I'm seeing when I'm working with clients is very similar to where I was, 2014, as I said, practicing and also experiencing and, trying to navigate that piece in terms of my personal life and my professional life. And this is just, 4 years later, very disappointing. So I think it's a wide range of emotions for folks. We're inundated with information at a time when, COVID-19, when the racial disparities emerging around that, was already detrimental for Black and Brown communities. So that's a little bit. I mean, I think if we move into the idea of how we talk to children and how we prepare them, my argument is, we know our research tells us that as infants, babies begin to track faces based on race. My son is 4. I started having conversations with him about race, a long time ago. They're going to be different. And so now we're talking about racism, and he's getting little history lessons, but we talk about that with younger children in the context of, fairness and unfairness and friendship that he can understand with some kind of developmentally appropriate accuracies with regard to racism. So today, in preparation for watching the town hall on CNN with Sesame Street, we talked about skin color specifically and how, and some individuals treat particularly brown folks. So we talked about just nuances in skin color that exist in our family, that exist in his classroom, and what that translates to, for some folks historically, what that translated to in terms of treatment, and how that still shows up today. He got it. He can grasp it as he gets older, right? Those will become more complex and more nuanced. So I think for parents, some tend to, shy away from the conversation. Our immediate, you want a reaction is you want to protect, but you're not protecting your children by having those conversations, per our previous, question answer piece, and not having those conversations, it's actually more detrimental to the psychological and the literal well-being of children as they become adolescents and emerging adults themselves. So those conversations need to happen early, they need to happen often, and they need to be varied in terms of what they look like. And there are many more resources, than when I was growing up or when my parents were growing up, by way of books, by way of videos, by way of even, if it gets to that point, clinicians who are aware and can assist, young children, adolescents, and even adults and families, and having those conversations and, attempting to heal from, significant racially traumatic situations.
But I think, Dr. Nwesi, you brought up a great point when you said awareness is the answer. And part of my awareness, part of my daily healing is my workout regime and music. It heals me to a degree. And I always love hip hop. I remember a song when I was a kid, it's like a jungle. Sometimes it makes me wonder how I keep from going under, ha, 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 ha. And, when the lyricist, when he wrote that or when he spoke that it was too broad, it was too big for me as a kid, and I didn't understand it. And it was like you said, as I grew up, I became more aware of that. It's like a jungle. Sometimes it makes you wonder how I keep from going under. And in this 401 years of us being in this experiment called America in 1619, and here we are 401 years later, it's still like a jungle sometimes. It makes me wonder how I keep from going under. And what there's a totem pole of racism in America. People talk a white man, a white woman, and Asians and Hispanics, all this foolishness. But in that, the bottom tier, as they try to impress upon people, is sometimes a black man. And the only person on this continent, in this country, who has experienced it in America, the United States of America, who's experienced racism more than a black man, and experienced this trauma, in my opinion, and again, opinion-based, more than the black man who has been harmed physically, emotionally, financially, economically, spiritually, more than the black man. The only person who's been unprotected, even by her own men, can't protect her, is the black woman. And I've seen in all of this horrible stuff that's happening, there's been 3 bright spots that I'm so proud of, and I've just been so impressed with. In the COVID situation, we watched Cuomo, and he was really talented. He did great work, and the governor of California, those guys did great work, and I was impressed with that. But 3 bright spots has come through this, and those bright spots are Mayor Latoya Cantrell of New Orleans, Louisiana, Mayor Bottoms of Atlanta, Georgia, and Muriel Bowser of Washington, D.C. These 3 women have just exhibited pure and natural leadership, the art and the science of leadership, the art and the science of caring for humans and making sure that these humans remain safe and valued. And I've seen just a powerful moment. Some people call it petty. I just found it so powerful, and it just, my shoulders, like with that exhaustion that we're talking about, my shoulders are tense. That's what I mean by exhaustion. But my shoulders came down when I saw her take that street name and rename it Black Lives Matter Plaza, and right there at St. John's Church. When she did that and had it painted Black Lives Matter on the street in case people couldn't understand what we're talking about, right. In case you don't understand, you can't hear the words that are coming out of my mouth. What was it about that was her exclamation of just exhaling this truth? Like, why did it feel so powerful to me?
I mean, I think it goes back to what you said in terms of, being younger and what it meant for folks to have you, right, in the face of an existence and a nation that they knew did not have the same sentiment to tell you to be proud and to appreciate, right, yourself, your skin color, that and everything that's in it. And I think in the face of this, kind of uprising, in essence, nationwide, when we truly, I mean, I think there are protests that are happening. There are also, anti-protesters and folks who are inciting violence. So we're really a very divided nation. You've got the, mayor of DC saying we're going to not just paint a little sign, right? This is the entire street and for everyone to see, so you can't miss it. And to be unapologetic about it and to be in the position to be able to do it, I think is what allows for just that sense of pride, right? it sends a very powerful message, right, to in the nation's capital, where we have the White House that may arguably have very different sentiment, right, or has not really spoken out in ways that some of the mayors or some of the other political leaders have in an effort to recognize this as an issue or as a problem. And it, moment of direct resistance, quite frankly, resistance to oppression, right? And saying, I have the ability to do this. I'm going to put this here for any and all to see, and it's going to be adjacent to the most powerful house, from a political standpoint, I suppose, in the country. And I'm not going to ask permission, right? For the President of the United States, this is something that we're going to do so that everyone can see it. And I do think that for a lot of folks who may be struggling, whether they know it or from an internalized standpoint, gives folks permission to say yes, right? So if she can do that, right, then maybe I can, say that a little bit louder, and really hold on to that and to be unapologetic in ways that I proclaim that to other folks around me. I'm not waiting for permission for other people to tell me that Black Lives Matter. I know that they do, and here it is.
And do you, Dr. Tarver, do you agree? Do you believe that, like, this feeling that I had, this exuberation, I set it attention. I saluted it. I was just like, it felt so right. Finally, someone gets it. Do you agree?
The power of affirmation. I can't underscore enough how important it is for someone to tell us that we matter. Because this whole movement about these injustices is because other people perceive that we don't have worth, that we don't have value, that we are beneath, that we are less than, that we deserve the outcome of what they're doing to us because of something inherently wrong and bad about us, something that's deficient and defunct about who we are as a people. So when someone says to you, hey, that thing you believe deep in here, but you struggle to find validation in, like, here you go. In all of because when I tell you I have been exhausted and that gave me joy, one, it gave me joy because it's in yellow, right? So because there's always this darkness that people associate with Black and brown people, like that we're just blights on humanity, that we are, that our plight is just ugly, that we have not contributed anything of worth. And so to see that bright yellow, that reminds us of who we really are as creators of this country, and particularly there in DC. DC was built on us. So to see that reminder that you are light, you are not darkness, you are not shame, you are not inadequacies, you are light, sunshine here on this road. So when it's cloudy outside, you can still see you matter. And even if the streets are covered in snow, you can look up on that sign and you can still see that you matter. And that more importantly, no one else will be able to tell you that you don't. Because now it is for all to see. And so there's not a Black Lives Matter and then underneath it, white lives matter too, all lives matter. It is simply that Black Lives Matter, and it's existing there on its own with no one questioning that it belongs there. And so, yes, I absolutely agree that was a win for us. We needed that win. And I'm very thankful for the leadership of the mayor who saw fit to make us believe in ourselves, even in the midst of all of this that is going on. Because I know we've questioned it. To remind us, like, hey, yeah, what you thought of, what your parents, what your church, what your family members talk to you about is true. You do matter. So yes, absolutely.
I think that we're so lucky to be able to have here, as I stated in that, watching African American women lead in a time of crisis, double pandemic that we're in. These women have come to the forefront and says, okay, I'll go, I'll lead, I'll stand here in the cut and protect you and your work. And I've never been so impressed. Black women have led us the whole time. So it shouldn't be that surprising to me, but I'm telling you, I've never been more impressed. So this is another episode of In Our Own Defense podcast. We're going to take a quick break and we're going to come back We have so many more exciting questions. Dr. Tarver and I have the luxury of having Dr. Noesi here with us today, discussing racial trauma and all of the events that are happening today. We have a few more questions for her, and we're excited that you're here to listen to us. So thank you, and we'll be right back.